All right, good evening. Welcome to Live at the Virginia Living Museum in Newport News. I'm Rebecca Kleinhampel, the director here at the museum. Very proud to be. Welcome to those on site and those also in Zoom. We have a presentation here this evening on a beautiful bright sky and daylight savings time. We are going to be talking about light pollution. And here with us today is Laura Greenleaf. Laura is the director, Virginia director, international chapter of Dark Sky Association. And Laura is a Virginian JMU student, as well as George Mason, master's in public administration. And so she's got a big presentation tonight. Promises that she was able to condense a very large topic to about a 30-minute conversation, and then of course questions at the end. So welcome and thank you for joining us at the museum. I have one more introduction, and that would be I'd like to welcome our newest city council member, Cleon Long is here in the audience as well. Thanks for being here, Cleon. All right, and welcome everybody. Laura, enlighten us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I've already had a chance to talk to a few of you, including fellow Virginia Master Naturalist. I've only been here one other time, and it was for a Virginia Master Naturalist State Conference. So it's really nice to be back. Director of Virginia IDA is too auspicious a title for me. I consider myself the volunteer representative of the Virginia membership of the International Dark Sky Association. We're a very informal chapter compared to some. But I've been an active member of IDA for about 10 years now. And I hope that what you'll get out of this evening is a more expansive idea of what conservation means. Conservation including a natural night and dark skies as a natural resource, as well as perhaps a new understanding of our relationship to artificial light and what we mean when we say better lighting or improved lighting. So I hope I want to familiarize you a little bit with IDA, give you a working definition of light pollution, the basics of good lighting versus bad lighting, why it matters to us and to every other living thing on the planet, a little bit about IDA's conservation program, including right here in Virginia, and what you can do at home and in your communities to make a difference. IDA was founded in 1988 by amateur astronomers who recognized light pollution as the threat, the leading threat to observatories and astronomical research. Definitely has expanded beyond that since. The office is still in Tucson, Arizona. It's a very small professional staff overseen by a board of directors, with this global mission and global reach, and totally dependent on volunteers, amazing people doing extraordinary work all over the world. And IDA realizes its mission through the areas of public policy, lighting, conservation, and education and outreach. So IDA is not anti-lighting. IDA is pro-responsible quality lighting that respects our natural environment and our well-being and our communities. And IDA works very closely with the lighting industry, lighting designers, manufacturers, distributors, and also provides the only third-party certified stamp of approval for dark sky friendly lighting. And through this work, IDA now addresses all the impacts of light pollution, not just astronomy, but also energy consumption, impacts, disruption to ecosystems and wildlife, the impact to our own safety and health, and then this overarching consequences for our communities, because we really underappreciate the role that lighting plays in the built environment and in our communities. But it is absolutely essential for us. And why is this just so pervasive throughout all of these sort of sectors and every aspect of our lives? And the reason is that this construct that we label a day is not just a day, it's a day and a night, because every living organism on the planet evolved, including this human species and our evolutionary ancestors evolved according to seasonal shifts in day length as we journey around the sun, and that roughly 24-hour cycle of light and darkness, with the night lit only by starlight and the lunar cycle. So it's only, this is what we used to experience. Only a few, I was thinking about this just a few minutes ago. My own paternal grandparents were born in 1895. And I thought, I'm separated, and my father had extraordinary memories of the night sky in rural New Jersey, where he used to go prior to World War II with his family. And so it's not that long ago. It's only 2-3 generations that we have separated ourselves from this sky. And this is one of IDA's certified dark sky sanctuaries in northeastern Minnesota. And we've traded that for this. And this is London. And again, a strong memory. I'm a country girl originally. And in 1990, I visited a friend in South London for 3 weeks. And I remember, this picture's taken a little bit later because there was no London Eye at that time yet. I remember asking him, why is the sky orange? Because I really didn't know. I had never encountered this before. And it was disturbing and frightening. And this is what most people associate with light pollution, the sky glow, when wasted light dumped up into the sky changes the color of the sky and erases the stars. As I said, we call that sky glow. But there are other ways that light pollution manifests for us in our lives, including glare, which we all experience from a direct point source in our environment. Light clutter, which can be extremely hazardous for motorists and other people moving around at night when you have this just haphazard, thoughtless, throwing lights up sort of willy-nilly. And then light trespass. And light trespass is the #1 reason people contact me asking for help. And this has been 10 years of this, of emails of people negatively affected by lighting that intrudes into their homes. This is a big quality of life issue. So that's how we experience it on the ground. And then this is what it looks like from the International Space Station. And this image is probably a good 10 years old or close to it. So unfortunately, it's worse now. And it's worse now because light pollution is increasing globally, at least 2% annually. That's what we used to think. And unfortunately, there's new data suggesting that it's as much as a 10% increase every year. And we often use images like this to demonstrate prosperity or progress, or showing this, our dominance over the earth. But this is just wasted light. This isn't electrification. It's light being dumped up into the sky. How do we do this? How have we managed to do this? It's with lighting that is either entirely unnecessary, that is in the wrong place or aimed badly, that is of a poor design, that is simply way too bright, or is too blue in its color, and its color temperature, which I'll get to later. And these photos demonstrate all of that. So we have this habit of lighting up empty parking lots all night long, and not only lighting up the empty parking lot, but also the trees and the sky and the surrounding area. And that picture on the bottom, I'm trying to remember which that is a Virginia Main Street small town. But look at those lights, those scorchingly bright, very white lights. So this does not look like a comfortable, cozy place to be to me. So when we're trying to understand what we mean by bad lighting, poorly designed lighting, this is a really helpful little depiction of that, even though it's also a bit outmoded. So this language of cutoff is still very commonly used to describe lighting design or fixture design. But you don't want to see this language in an ordinance anymore, because it really is outdated. So there's a classification system if you're assessing a light that you would want to have, and that's actually called bug. for backlight, uplight, and glare. Now that's, you know, kind of technical, but just be aware that that exists because it really analyzes where light is emitted. However, for general education purposes, this kind of makes the point that if you have no cutoff whatsoever, no shielding, no source of light, you know, being recessed into the top of the fixture, you have this non-cutoff effect of light blasted in all directions. If you have a cap on that light, you cut it down a little bit, you can keep cutting it down. And what we used to call a full cutoff light has no light emitted above a horizontal line through the middle of that fixture. So still, you know, demonstrates the basics here. So what do I mean when I made a reference to the color of light? The appearance of color is derived from where energy is emitted on the spectrum of short wavelengths, which appear blue in the blue-violet range, to the longer wavelengths in that sort of yellow, orange, red range. And this is a blunt instrument for describing that color correlated temperature, but this is what we use typically, and it's measured in Kelvin. So 2700 Kelvin is kind of the sweet spot. Lighting really should be there or below. And 2700 Kelvin is kind of in that candlelight, lamplight, the old-fashioned high-pressure sodium street light, that, you know, that warm orange glow. That's where that is, and that's very, very comfortable to us. It's what people are most tend to prefer. And it also minimizes glare, and it also minimizes physiological reactions to light, which I'll talk about briefly later. But when you start getting bluer and you start going up that Kelvin, you start to increase the perception of glare. And again, getting back to this is just an example. I can't not mention acorn lights in any presentation because they are like my poster child for a bad light. I wish I could just eliminate them completely, but they're ubiquitous from small towns to big cities. We love these lights. We think they are historic. We think they're ornamental. We like the way they look by day, and by night they are blasting light in all directions. There's nothing historic about this light, and there's definitely nothing historic about the amount of punch that they now deliver in terms of intensity. But look at the light fixtures below on the bottom, and those are alternatives to that bad light. So this is what we can do with light that is also pedestrian scale, ornamental really, but you are not looking directly at the source of light, and it is not blasting in all directions. So that's just one contrast of good, bad. So you have an idea of what's possible with lighting. And the underlying principles of good lighting. This is, again, partnership with the industry, IDA and the Illuminating Engineering Society, which sets the standards, the guidelines for illumination levels based on application, came up with these principles for responsible outdoor lighting. It should be useful. In other words, it should have a justified purpose. It should be targeted and only lighting what's intended to be lit. The light level should be as low as possible to achieve that goal for good visibility and no higher. And the light should be controlled, meaning and this is very true with LED lighting, this is the overlooked potential. You can control it to dim it, to respond to demand, to say traffic levels, and you can turn it instant on, off. So there's no need to be lighting everything all night long. And then again, color, warm, warm color. So I talk about LED lighting because we have, in the past 10 years, we are making this tremendous transition to this new technology, and this is the present and the future. And when LED was sort of first launching, you know, I had somebody from a prominent environmental organization say to me, LED lighting is going to fix light pollution. I was like, afraid not. And like any technology, like all technologies, it's all in how we use it. It's not inherently good or bad. It's the decisions we make and how we apply it. And with early LED adoption, there were things that ended up, resulting in clearly more light pollution for one thing, and more use. So we have this human habit that when something is very efficient and very cheap, we consume more of it. It's called the rebound effect. So that by unit, something's getting more efficient, but you're just using more and more of it. You take that with poor design that is not achieving those goals, those principles we just talked about, plus this mentality that brighter is better, that more lighting is better, and the brighter it is, it's better, and it's cheaper, so we can use more, and you end up with more light pollution. And again, in these early years of LED adoption, this is what an IDA was on the front lines of this. So IDA recognized, first of all, in the early technology, it was the cheapest LED to produce was very blue rich. So it had a lot of energy output in that blue, violet, blue, white range. And it was significantly more costly to do sort of anything else in that early stage of development. So you ended up with these very blue lights. And IDA recognized, as astronomers recognized, that blue light scattered more much more broadly in the atmosphere. So they were seeing an increase in sky glow. That was a big tip off that we needed to do something differently. At the same time, there was this increase in illumination level. So again, because it's efficient, we'll use more of it. It's getting brighter and brighter. There were flaws in design. You know, it's fundamentally different than older technology. You're not converting energy to light through a filament. You've got this diode array. And that's a lot of pinpoint glare. So those factors were producing more glare. And then all of these installations were going in without adaptive control, the most beautiful feature of LED lighting of all, this ability to manipulate it. But fortunately, the good news is that technology changes really rapidly. And LED technology has just grown by leaps and bounds, and we can now do this with it instead of what you saw before. And it's gotten much more cost efficient and cost effective to do this. So the gap, the efficiency cost gap just went down and down and down. And we can now produce these warmer colors without a significant loss in efficiency. So there's really no excuse for the bad stuff. And as LED was rolling out, as all these streetlight conversions were happening, and there was a lot of backlash. So there were many communities in the United States and around the world where there was a huge backlash to LED streetlight conversions because of these negative impacts. Concurrently with that, the American Medical Association was recognizing light pollution as an issue to jump into. And by 2016, they had actually put their support behind IDA standards for LED lighting. And the first reason for that was glare. And without getting into the sort of the details of the physiology of glare decreases visibility and impairs our vision, especially as we age. Our eyes start to age when we're in our 30s, really, and those changes exacerbate the impact of glare to our vision. And so we get these brighter and brighter environments that are really just blinding us, so that we can no longer see contrast, which is the key feature of our night functioning vision, and the ability to adapt to differing light levels. So our eyes adapt to the brightest light in our field of vision. And then it takes a long time to be able to see in lower lit areas. So this is one of the primary reasons that they were concerned. The next reason they were concerned was that, just as our ears enable us to hear, and they also provide us with balance and equilibrium, so our eyes have this non-visual role. And our eyes transmit messages that are encoded in light and dark to this amazing thing called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or better known as the body clock, which synchronizes our circadian rhythms. And that's our body temperature, blood pressure, alertness, and probably what most people are now familiar with, melatonin production. And melatonin production, we rely on not just for restful sleep, but there's also research showing a correlation with melatonin suppression and certain cancers. So darkness is the trigger for melatonin production, and even very low levels of light at night will suppress melatonin production. So this is why light pollution, whether it's just because the sky is so darn bright outside or because you have somebody's light directly shining into your window, this is another reason the American Medical Association regards light pollution as a public health risk. And just as it affects us, it affects every other living thing. And as a master naturalist, especially in years past, I did lots of education with little kids. And if you've done habitat, wildlife education with little kids, you know that you teach them there are these components of habitat: food, water, shelter, cover, a safe place to raise young. And to that, I add darkness and a natural night. So for wildlife, light pollution kind of comes at them in two different ways. You can think of it as being dispersed in the environment, this cumulative effect, as with sky glow, or a really immediate presence in the environment, like a floodlight or a street light. And I always think of that as being like point and non-point sources of pollution, which we tend to associate with water pollution. How does artificial light at night, and that is a term, ALAN, how does it interfere? It interferes with their orientation, just them getting their bearings, communication, navigation, migration being an extension of navigation, the balance of predator-prey relationships, their foraging for food, and their mating and reproduction. And this is exceptionally true for nocturnal species. And the numbers I don't have off the top of my head, but I think it's something like 60% of invertebrates and 30% of vertebrates are nocturnal. But this also does have consequences for diurnal species. How does it do this? How does it become this disruptor of habitat? To begin with, it alters day length. It alters what we call photoperiod. So there's this artificial extending of the day. It impairs their dark adapted vision just as it does ours. It disrupts their physiology, just like us. And it erases what we call the celestial compass, the constellations that some species actually navigate by. And then it causes phototaxis, which is just a fancy word for either being attracted to light or averse and repelled by light. It can be a positive or a negative. And this has consequences for the individual organisms and for population level survival. Examples: frogs. Frogs and salamanders, both being amphibian species that are not very adaptable. They are dependent on water, which gives them fewer options. So research does show that they have observed that frogs reduce their calling in lighted areas, that they don't move around as much, and they're not foraging as much. Okay, that clearly has consequences. And with salamanders, they have observed that it can interfere with their return to their breeding pools. Insects, insect apocalypse. This is something that's been kind of in the public mind relatively recently. Lots of different ways it affects light pollution affects insects. The big picture there, the vacuum effect. Attracting insects to lights, sucking them out of the environment so that biomass is not out there where it's needed for prey species to feed on, as well as increasing mortality. Fireflies, there's been a lot of research about the impact of light pollution on fireflies and how it interferes with their bioluminescent communication and therefore their mating and reproduction. The megafauna moths seem to be particularly hard hit by light pollution. And this one is demonstrating, light at night can make them go into quiescence. They are resting, they're just down and not moving. And if they're down and not moving, they're not doing what they need to be doing out there at night. And then the not so lowly dung beetle. I didn't realize how many species of dung beetle there are. There are a lot, but there's some really recent research into a particular species of dung beetle, I think in sub-Saharan Africa, and how they navigate by celestial compass and polarized lunar light. Don't ask me to explain that. I can read it and understand it, but then that's it. And light pollution disrupting that straight line they need to be able to make back to their destination. So how does that ripple through the ecosystem? Well, let's talk about bats. And bats already so incredibly hard hit by, white nose syndrome, obviously coming to the very top of that list. But most of our bat species eat insects. So if we are sucking insects out of the environment, they're not available for bats to feed on. And different, again, these memories, this was like one of the first times I did a presentation on light pollution 10 years ago. And it was a fellow master naturalist said to me, but the bats love my yard light. I'm like, okay, so yeah, some bats are attracted to lights and will feed it lights, but others will not. So again, phototaxis cuts both ways. And unfortunately, it seems that the species that are light averse and avoidant are those that are in greatest need of conservation. So you've got winners and losers, right? Competitive advantage. Let's see, what else did I want to say about bats? I think there's also been some research showing that they do not emerge from their roosts at the same time. Again, artificial extended day becomes a factor. Well, let's talk about birds, because here we are in the spring migration on the Atlantic coast flyway. 650 North American species of birds, most of them migratory, and of those, 80% migrate by night. We light up the sky, we light up our buildings, and we lose as many as 1 billion birds in building collisions, just building collisions in the United States alone. That's at different heights too. There's different altitudes for different species. And we know this because there are amazing volunteers in cities all over North America who get up at dawn to collect the bodies of these birds. And I always get choked up when I look at these images. And I can't imagine that being my volunteer project. Yeah, but it has a tremendous consequence. And not only are birds being, first of all, they're being pulled off course by light if they are attracted to light. They're striking lit up buildings at night. They're losing the celestial compass because the sky is completely washed out. And in the example of the 9/11 tribute, which you're probably familiar with, this became a real sort of benchmark in research on the effect of light pollution on birds, because it was those beams of light were capturing thousands of birds a night. And Cornell Ornithology was able to partner with the city and with the memorial to start turning off those lights periodically. So they sort of monitor that situation and they will turn them off, and the birds very quickly disperse, which is a good thing. And then this building, the Chicago Conference Center, is another example of a single building that was having massive bird kills, where they started turning it off. So back around 1993, the Lights Out movement started in Toronto with the Fatal Light Awareness Project, which in this country became the Lights Out campaigns. And there are now 30 members of the Lights Out network in North America, unfortunately none in Virginia. And this is this effort to dim the skylines for fall and spring migratory seasons. I don't know why we can't just do it year round. That's always the thing that I think about. If we can do it then, we don't need them at all. But has been extremely successful in many places, particularly Texas. Bearing in mind that making a commitment to this is one thing, and codification is another, and then enforcement is another. So it's not enough just to say we want to be a lights out city. You've got to make it happen. And this organization, Birdcast, is a relatively new partner in this effort. Really interesting. Check this out. They're using data to inform when it's most critical to get those lights down, because they're able to track the kind of the peaks of migration. Bearing in mind that it's not just buildings and skylines that pose a hazard, It's also just street lights. And this was just a couple of years ago. I saw this headline in New Zealand where these petrol fledglings were hitting and dying on roads. And it was right after they had put in a new LED streetlight conversion. And it was believed that they were mistaking the lights for bioluminescent fish that they feed on. And so those lights, they were turning those lights off and well-timed to protect the birds. I mentioned a little bit earlier that although the focus is on nocturnal species, there are consequences to all diurnal species as well. And there's been a good bit of research into bird species, diurnal bird species, and how light pollution changes their vocalization patterns. You know, they're singing when they ought to be sleeping, accelerating maturation and changing patterns in breeding. And so once again, you get certain species that start to flourish and do very well and others that do not. And that you get that system of winners and losers. And it seems to be the species of most conservation concern that are the least adaptable. So there's a whole lot we can do about light pollution, but I do just want to talk about conservation, which IDA leads in with its Dark Sky Places program. There are 201 certified dark sky places in the world. It is a rigorous program. This is not an easy designation to obtain or to sustain, because a dark sky place can lose that designation if the sky deteriorates in its quality. And there are 5 designations ranging from these pristine remote sanctuaries with the very darkest of skies to urban locations. And this includes 5 dark sky parks right here in Virginia. I don't know how many of you were aware that we have IDA certified dark sky parks. I never thought I'd see the day. I mean, I would 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought this would happen. Stanton River State Park came first, and then the others. But bearing in mind that this doesn't mean that these are really, high quality dark skies. Sky Meadows is particularly close to my heart because I grew up just north of Sky Meadows before it was a state park and lived just south of it. So I remember that sky in the late 70s and early 80s, and I know it now. And you can see the sky glow behind Sky Meadows on the far right. That's sky glow from Manassas and Warrenton. So that's an imperiled dark sky place. It's teetering, that sky. So there has to be real commitment and advocacy on the part really of municipalities to change lighting policy and practice. Another great step forward was when DCR in their 2018 Virginia Outdoors Plan recognized the natural night and dark skies as a scenic resource. That was a great leap forward, and that has also definitely energized the dark sky park movement. So, and again, just to sort of understand what we mean by a dark sky and the sort of flexibility of the Dark Sky Places program, this is called the Bortle scale. It is an astronomical scale of ranking night sky quality. And on the far right, you've got the excellent dark sky class 1 skies. We don't have that in Virginia. I spend time out in Highland County as much as I can, and was just there last weekend and thankfully had a clear night, just spectacular. But even then, even with that mountain range blocking light from the Shenandoah Valley, there was still sky glow from really like the Stanton, Harrisonburg, Waynesboro area. So it does intrude. Most of us are living, right? I mean, you all, I in Richmond, we're living under 7, 8, 9 polluted skies. And here's Virginia, just to give you a sense of where things stand. This is not an up-to-date image. The big blue blob is West Virginia and Western Allegheny Highlands. And then you see that white, pink, red blotches of the Northern Virginia suburbs, Richmond and Hampton Roads area. So where do you start? How do you start to make a difference? It's overwhelming, and yet it's also just comes down to the flip of a switch. But you can make small changes at home with the lighting at your own home, evaluating that. Do you leave lights on at night that you don't need to leave on? Can you change a bulb to a lower intensity? Can you get a new fixture that's IDA approved? And can you talk to your neighbors about it? Again, just reiterating these 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting. It's so logical, you know, it's so it's easy to remember, and it just underscores all good policy. We do have Dark Sky Week coming up, April 15th to 22nd. You know, maybe you can get out to a darker place, or just take advantage of the opportunity to educate people about dark skies. Another, if you're interested in citizen science, Globe at Night is a really cool citizen science opportunity where you don't have to be an astronomer. They help you at certain times of the year see if you can locate in your sky certain celestial objects, and that becomes data to understand the spread of light pollution. And I hope you'll visit our website. And I should note that if you, through the course of the year, you will see changes to the International Dark Sky Association, which is undergoing a big strategic plan overhaul and rebranding, of course. So this is an organization that is going to become just Dark Sky, but for now we're still IDA, and I hope you'll check it out. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions. Questions?
Like cutoff as a term anymore?
It's called bug, backlight uplight glare, and that's what's used by the Illuminating Engineering Society. So if you were really needed to evaluate fixture design, because you want to have low to 0 ratings on those 3 pillars. Some do. We do have outdoor lighting ordinances in Virginia. I mean, I don't have a count anymore, and they might range from a few words to something fairly substantial, like in Fairfax County. But enforcement is always, first of all, there's flaws to ordinances. They're full of loopholes. They're vague. They're outdated, and then they're not enforced. There are some. Well, you know, I will tell you that what's interesting is, for instance, Nelson County declared last year, they are using their night skies as a tourism destination. So that is increasing. I think the dark sky parks are helping increase awareness, but no, there's not enough movement. There's definitely not enough movement to change lighting policy and practices in our communities. And that's where it has to happen. But there are a lot of advocates. I will say that there's a tremendous increase in advocacy all over Virginia. So I want to show you a few books really quickly. This is a book I mentioned to someone earlier. This was just released last month. It's called The Darkness Manifesto on Light Pollution, Night Ecology, and the Ancient Rhythms That Sustain Life. Maybe I should hold it up for the camera. And this was actually reviewed in all major newspapers, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, New Yorker. It's a great read, and it's by, I think he is a Swedish biologist. Someone in the audience is just finished The End of Night. And The End of Night is actually written by someone I got to be friends with years ago, Paul Bogart, because he was a professor at JMU for a period of time before returning to his home city of Minneapolis. Also a really wonderful read that I recommend. And there's some other books over here as well. Please feel free to come over and look at them. If you have children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews or children of friends, that's one of the most important things that we can all do is get our kids out under a starry sky so that they know that exists, and get them comfortable with the natural night and with darkness, because otherwise, I think at this point we're at like 90% of the world's population can't see the Milky Way where they live. So we are at this point where the stars are something that is fictional almost. And to get that, that wow factor is hard to come by, but it is somewhat accessible for us, at least, even having access to, as I said, far Western Virginia and West Virginia. So I just a plug for them. And I even have some children's books. My son is now 15. I raided his book collection to bring a few books to see if they make great gifts, good for gift shops. So please feel free to take a look. Please feel free to, if you have a question down the, later on, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to help however I can. Okay.
You know, in Virginia Beach, if there's the effort to change the lights on the boardwalk at the oceanfront from red for the coming up.
So the question was, are there any plans or intention in Virginia Beach to change lighting to amber, warmer lights to help sea turtles? I didn't mention sea turtles at all because it tends to be something people are much more familiar with, but sea turtle hatchlings orient by the light over the ocean. And if there is shoreline coastal light pollution, will reorient to that lighting and perish in various ways. So there has been a lot of, and actually IDA has been involved with, they were involved with Florida's policy. So no, I don't know about that. I am unaware of any plans for that, but that would be a wonderful thing to advocate for. I don't know a lot about sea turtle populations in Virginia Beach, but I believe that line might be moving northward as well. So I think that would be a great thing for Virginia Beach residents to advocate for. So the question was, do I have any recommendations for how you approach an institution like a college campus or a museum or somebody that's lighting up all night and you would like to change them? I don't have any specific recommendations other than to come at it from a mutual problem solving attitude. So, and I always, I'm actually very introverted, and so I'm always really happy for other people to be doing that, because actually that sort of thing can be really terrifying, right? But if you have connections, if you know somebody who has a connection to leadership, that's a good way to start. I think also treating it as an opportunity to show leadership. So I think a really gentle, can we talk about this? And maybe if it's an example, if it's a college or a museum, I mean, here we are in a museum right here giving a presentation, see if that's something they would be willing to collaborate on. Yes. So the question was that I think there is a perception of safety associated with lighting and how to counteract it. It is really hard. It is really hard. So that is, so much of our lighting is justified on the basis of safety and security. That's one of the big loopholes in ordinances. And it's a really complicated, nuanced topic, which is why I completely cut it out of this presentation. I think that you can begin with the fact, the safety of our vision, right? That you really can't, what's to argue with that quality lighting that doesn't blind you, enables you to see better, and is therefore safer. Like I said, it depends on, it really depends on, it is a case-by-case situation. Who are you talking to? Is it your neighbor, or is it an elected official? So you have to acknowledge the feeling of security, and that it matters. People need to feel secure. But feeling secure is not the same thing as being, feeling safer is not the same as being safer. And lighting can be helpful it can be also counterproductive, or it can have no, make no change whatsoever. So that we need to be really, intentional about lighting. But I do have resources on lighting and crime if you're really doing a deep dive into that. But yeah. Mhm. Well, oh, sure. So in terms of pulling them off course, right? I was focusing on building collisions and capture. And so I did skip over some of that. But yes, pulling birds, migratory birds off course, we know how much energy it takes for them to migrate. And then they are using up stores of energy and not getting where they need to go. So you're just talking about increased mortality, whether it's mortality from the building strike or it's exhaustion that they are unable to go on. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I kind of skipped over that. Yes. Yes. Right. And I'm not an insurance attorney, so but I know that explanation is given a lot. I'm sorry, the question was, what about when people light up exteriors of buildings and environments because of liability and it's required by insurance? I can't say that I can confirm that insurance companies require entities holding, the client or consumer to light things up, because I see places that are not lit up. So, which is it? Or can you at the very least light minimally, right? And use motion detectors, for instance. So, what is truly needed? And we just have this tendency to go overboard. So I think there's also, it's like, well, what is actually required to meet that standard? And, again, with property crime, one of the things that the research has shown, or, sort of failed, not shown, if you have an area that's deserted at night and there's no activity and there are no witnesses, witnesses are key to light having a purpose. Somebody's got to be there to see something for it to be effective. But otherwise, if you've got, say, a remote home down a driveway, lighting it up is really only going to attract attention to it. So there's this other element of, you're really just drawing attention to a target and giving somebody the lighting they need to do, what they want to do. So that's, that's another way that it's counterproductive. Or if you're creating so much lighting and glare and you're lighting up the neighbor's home so that they've got blackout curtains down all the time, they're definitely not going to see what's going on at your house. So, and that's when this is such a big problem, that you go into any big box store now and they've devoted whole aisles to blackout curtains. And that should be telling us something that we're doing wrong. I don't know how well that answered your question, but that does definitely come up. Yes. Well, I think oh gosh, I failed to mention the National Park Service. I'm sorry, the question again was, where do you go for good information on how artificial light at night is affecting ecology? And I also cut plants totally out of this presentation, but yes, lighting up the night is also bad for plant life. You can go to IDA's website, and there's a whole, section on ecosystems that will then lead you to other information. Audubon, AB's American Bird Conservancy, Cornell Ornithology are all good resources specific to birds. There's just a ton of research out there. I don't even know where to begin. And the book I mentioned, The Darkness Manifesto, is, as I said, is really new, and that's something you will want. This is a much older book, and it's very sort of academic. It's called Ecological Consequences of Artificial Light Nighting. And it was sort of a survey, a compilation of all the research to date when this was published. It's not current anymore, but Travis Longcore, one of the authors, is still a leader in research on light pollution and its ecological impacts. But I mean, if you just do searches now, you just get such an abundance of high quality sources, professional scientific journals and that sort of thing. So for anybody still on Zoom, we're talking about insurance policies and what leeway they would give somebody to control their own lighting. And I think, you mentioned, intentional, which is a favorite word of mine when it comes to doing lighting well and skillfully. Very little of our lighting is being designed by a lighting designer. I mean, people are making decisions about lighting they don't know anything about lighting, and they're just buying some package that's being, sold to them by a manufacturer. So I'm happy to say that something IDA is going to be working on is a credentialing and certification for lighting designers. Now, there are great lighting designers out there. Nancy Clanton and Associates out in Denver, Colorado has been at the top of that field for decades. IDA has an awards process every year, and lighting design and technology is one of them. So there's lots of good stuff happening, but it's just that, it's a small piece of the overall pie. Let's see. So, but that's a really good point, that just because you might want to have lighting, it doesn't mean you have to have bad lighting or too much of it. I'm sorry, you had a question. I know. So this is like, oh, stop, no more. So this is a discussion of just the marketing of lighting and how it's kind of everywhere, like QVC and Amazon. And yes, I see this too. And it's appealing to fear, again, right? Fear of darkness, associating lighting with safety, and they're making money off of that, right? And so coming back to what I said at the beginning, like the two takeaways being, one, this expanded understanding of conservation to include the night, but also a different understanding of lighting and what we mean by better lighting and improved lighting. Because so often when there are references to improved lighting, like it's a municipal project or what have you, they really just mean more lighting and brighter lighting, which brings us back to that early implementation of LED and where things went off the rails, where because it was more efficient, because it was cheaper, it's like, let's light more places with more lights at brighter light levels. And at that point, that's where the consumption was, overtaking your efficiency, and you're just using more and more and more. And that's why we've got this, just ever, it's a tool that we're not using in a thoughtful, wise way, but we have to change our relationship to lighting. That's not going to happen overnight, so to speak. I mean, this is generations of change, but I think I'd like to believe that we are maybe at a tipping point. I'm just stunned at how much awareness there is that this is much more in the mainstream. You see changes happening. I mean, there are really cool things happening in different places that you can read about on IDA's website. If you go to their news, their blog is full of that. But like in Europe right now, right? I mean, because of energy costs, the need to reduce energy costs, a lot of this has involved dimming the cities at night. Now, if they could sustain that and essentially make that permanent, rather than just an interim, measure, that's where you sort of start to just shift what people are used to. That's a great question. So the question was, internationally, is there any country that's sort of really at the vanguard of preventing light pollution? And I wish I had prepared for that question ahead of time. Look up Chile. actually, because I believe they passed some really stringent light pollution regulations because of observatories. Oh gosh. I mean, I don't know that there's any one leader. There's some good things happening in a lot of different places. And here in this country, the city of Pittsburgh last year passed the first like true dark sky ordinance. Now, how that gets implemented and put into practice, we will wait and see, but that was really extraordinary news. The real deal, dark sky ordinance, IDA standards. A couple of years ago, Tucson, it was Tucson. So Tucson did a streetlight conversion, an LED streetlight conversion with no light above 3000 Kelvin. Ideally, it would have been lower. And they did employ dimming. So I believe that I don't know at what point in the night, I believe the light is dimmed to maybe even 50% of full power. I'm not sure. And they did measurably reduce their lumens, right? Reduce their illumination output. So there are good things happening. It's just that it's, again, just too small a proportion of all of our lighting. Yes. The question was, having read The End of Night, which opens, right? The chapters in The End of Night run backwards because they follow the Bortle scale. So you start with chapter 9 in Las Vegas. In this country, I think so, but I believe that Singapore and Hong Kong are considered the brightest cities globally, but I'm not sure. Yeah, just turn it off. Just flip a switch. So simple. We can do this. We absolutely can do this. We can do better. Were there any questions from? No? Okay. Nobody online? No.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Laura Greenleaf, thank you for bringing IDA. Yeah, absolutely. I learn so much every month when we do our Naturally Speaking series. Want to share that next month on April 20, we are going to welcome Dan Crystal, who's a professor of biology at William and Mary, just up the road a bit. And Dan's going to talk with us about native bird species and population and conservation actions we can take. Again, what can we do? Laura, thank you so much. Also want to mention that we have a treat here this evening, and Dr. Kelly Herbst is here with us, and she would like to take you, if you're interested, up to the top of the building to our observatory, show you around a little bit at the top of the Virginia Living Museum. So thank you, Dr. Herbst, for being here. Again, we'll see you next April 20. If you have time before then and you're going to enjoy spring break, we've got a plethora of opportunities for you and your family here. And we'll have our native plant sale beginning in April 20. So check out thevlm.org. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us on Zoom. Have a good evening.